store for you tonight. For the past 20, 25 years, I've been covering the video game industry as a journalist and as a host, and one of the things I've really been passionate about is celebrating the creators behind some of the best video games that have been made over the past few decades. And gaming is such an incredible art form, and it really is an art form that blends together technology and entertainment unlike any other medium. And tonight you're going to hear from one of our industry's finest creators who has, for a long time, brought together the worlds of gaming, entertainment, and technology. So this is the start of a series, the Games Masterclass. We're going to be doing a bunch of these in 2015 in partnership between Petrol and BAFTA, but this is a great way to kick it off. So thank you for joining us. Chris Roberts will be joining us shortly, but before that, it's my pleasure to introduce from BAFTA Los Angeles, Philip Ashcroft and James Knight. Guys. Thanks, Phil.
Hello, 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 hello. Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. I'm Phil. This is James. The third co-chair of the Games Committee would be out front, but he's way too busy back there doing the real work. So Carl Stewart is heavily behind the scenes producing stuff this evening. So I want to thank him. We want to thank the office for helping put this all together. The Masterclass program is something that's is very important, and it's the first Masterclass that we've done in 2015. This is the start of a new season of events for us, bringing the best of film, TV, and games together. What we're about to see is something very exciting, and I want to hand over to James.
Thanks for leaving me something to say. No, I'm joking. BAFTA LA is really excited to be in the game space and get more involved in the game space, and we need your help to do that. So if any of you are interested in becoming BAFTA LA members and BAFTA LA Games members, just come find us in the lobby and we'll hand you a little card. Want to say hello again to everybody watching on twitch.tv/BAFTA Los Angeles. And enjoy the masterclass, and we're going to introduce Melissa. Brilliant. Thanks.
I do have my own microphone. So thank you. I'm proud to be here representing WD. WD has been a long-standing leading provider of storage. This is an exciting space for us. We've been champions of content for a very long time, and this is just a natural extension of what it is we do and the need for storage in our space. WD is close to storing half of the world's digital content, and few people realize that they probably own a WD, but not everybody knows us. And this is one way for us to continue to build our brand and support those content creators, the gamers alike. They're avid, passionate pursuers of our technology and want to continue to deliver solid experiences for them from a storage perspective. So thank you for allowing us to sponsor this event. We're excited to keep it going forward. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Melissa. And now I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Chris Roberts. Now, let me tell you a bit about Chris and the history that I have with him. Back in the early 1990s, believe it or not, over 20 years ago, I was a young teenager in Canada who loved video games, played a lot of video games, and started writing about them for game magazines. And that was at a point where games were still, sort of the redheaded stepchild of entertainment. People played them, they loved them. If you loved games, if you didn't get games, you didn't really understand them. Sort of like what's happening a little bit in the world of esports right now, which you've probably heard about. But anyways, gaming was cool for me, but wasn't necessarily cool for people around me. And I remember in 1995, 20 years ago, I got invited down to Los Angeles to come to the set of a video game, which was a pretty cool thing. I was a kid, so my chaperone came with me, who happened to be my father, and I came down to Los Angeles to the set of a game called Wing Commander 4. And this was a game that Chris was not only directing, because Chris has a great history, as you'll hear, working on games, but he also directed the film sequences. And they had real sets. It starred Luke Skywalker himself, Mark Hamill, Malcolm McDowell was in it. And I got to go on set of this video game. And I still remember my dad was with me, and he thought, wow, video games have arrived. This is really cool. So Chris Roberts is always a guy that has made games cool in the eyes of my father. So I will always be thankful to him for giving me that moment. And Chris, you know, it was amazing. It was 20 years ago when I was just starting out in the industry. And for the past 20 years, Chris really has done a lot to blend together the world of gaming and entertainment. As you'll hear, I mean, he's directed theatrical films, he's directed games, and what he's doing now with Star Citizen is a completely new approach to creating video games, working with the community. He's got an incredible story. I don't mean to spoil it. Some of you may know about sort of the success they've had with crowdfunding. I'll let him tell you all the crazy stats, but it really is a new model for building video games, and Chris is a pioneer and has continued to pioneer in his career and do many different and amazing things. So from 20 years ago on the set of Wing Commander 4 to here today in January 2015 at the BAFTA masterclass, he's still as relevant and as creative as he's ever been. So please join me in welcoming our first ever BAFTA Games Masterclass guest, Chris Roberts.
Thanks, Jeff. Much appreciated.
It's all yours.
All right.
All right.
Hello, everyone. Well, thanks for showing up for the masterclass here. Anyway, I'd like to thank BAFTA LA and Western Digital and Jeff for allowing me to come here and give me a nice intro. And I want to apologize in advance for the people that sort of know all my background and history, because some of that's going to be in this presentation for the people that don't necessarily know it all. But let's get to our presentation. So there and back again, A Game Designer's Tale by Chris Roberts. So obviously I was games, went to movies, and back to games, and kind of part of that journey sort of informed what I'm doing right now with Star Citizen, and so we'll take that little journey, and then we'll sort of get into the things that I think are interesting for people to take away from what we're trying to do on Star Citizen. So we'll talk about my history, publishing model, which I think is in need of changing in a certain level, kind of the vision that I wanted to do and have been trying to execute for Star Citizen, how we're involving the community, and how it all sort of comes together. But first, we've got to start with me. So, you know, my beginning in games. Yes, I know it's a little bit of a sort of Hobbit Tolkien theme that we're doing here. But my first, professional game was that I was paid for anyway was called Kong. It was in the BBC Micro user, which this was back in England, and there was a computer called the BBC Micro, and it was 6502 and had a whopping 32K, of which 20K was used by the screen, so you had about 12K to do all your programming, graphics, and everything. So I think most people's emails easily surpass 12K, even if they just say hello in them nowadays. So I was paid £100 for that. It was published in the center of the magazine as sort of the game of the month. And then I went on to do 3 more games. These were games that are actually sold in stores in England, so Wizardor, Matchday, and Striker's Run. And so by the age of 18, I'd had 3 #1 hits on the BBC Micro, which it was a very small industry then, so there weren't so many people buying stuff, but not bad for someone that was that young. And then I had taken my O-levels and A-levels, which is sort of the English equivalent of your GEDs and all the rest of the stuff. And I decided to take a year off before going to university and was working on my next game, which became Times of Law. And during that time, I went across to visit my parents, who had moved to America in Austin, Texas. My father was a university professor, and he was recruited to the University of Texas from Manchester University, where he previously was. And back in those days, you just, it was you and your computer in your bedroom or in a study somewhere. So you didn't need to have the huge teams that you have now. So I sort of figured that, okay, well, I'll just hang out here in Austin. The weather's nice. The American girls liked my stronger English accent back then. And of course, in the old days, film and TV was basically something that you got much sooner. Like, I got to see Aliens before all my friends did back in England, and that was definitely a bragging thing that I got when I went back to visit them. And so I started to work on Times Law, and during my process there, I'd had an artist, and the artist, Dennis Lubey, was hired about 3 weeks later to be the first full-time artist at Origin Systems, and that's how I joined Origin Systems. I came in to meet Richard Garriott, who's Lord British, who's quite well known for doing this series of fantasy role-playing games called Ultima. And we just got on really well. We had a similar idea and approach to building worlds and telling stories, and so I decided that, okay, well, I might as well, work over here, and I'll work with Origin Systems. And so I carried on to do Times of Lore, which was a #1 hit on the Ingram's bestseller hit list, which was pretty good. And then after that, we followed up with Bad Blood, which was a sort of post-apocalyptic RPG, top-down. Both Times of Lore and Bad Blood was sort of a top-down kind of gauntlet style of games, and they had, I tried to do some things that were different back in the time, which was instead of having everything typed in by text, it was more sort of about icons and making it easier to use. So a lot of the precursor to stuff that you started to see in console games much further down the road was some of the stuff that I was trying to develop for Times of Lore, mainly because it was on a Commodore 64, and I sort of felt like I wanted to be able to play it with a joystick, and was trying to figure out how to do an interface that would work well for that. So I have always been interested in trying to sort of push the different ways of interfacing and interacting with the game, and how you feel and how it connects you to the world. And during that time, Origin went from about 4 million in revenue to about 50, of which a large part of it was because of the next game I did, which was Wing Commander. So, Wing Commander was the game that obviously put me on the map. It was sort of the accumulation of all my experience of making games before, my love of science fiction, my love of movies, and the fact that I was always drawn to stories as a context and characters for meaning, even in a game. So I'd much rather have a story that drives me to achieve things, and not want to let down, say, my wingmen that are real characters, versus achieving a high score to beat a level of something. And that was the thing that I from my standpoint, feel like set Wing Commander apart back in the day, which was it was much more about creating a world and a universe that you could live inside. And I look back on the graphics now, it was very primitive, but I think back in the day, a few people in here I think have played Wing Commander back in the day. It was fairly powerful, because it was one of the first times where you sort of felt like you were sort of immersed in that world, and everything was built to be that way. You sort of see in the screenshot, I can't look up there but I can look down here. In the screenshot, there's the point of view, looking at your cockpit, right? So that was one of the things that was done to sort of put you in the point of view of the character. Or when you were aboard the ship, you would be there. You would see the pilot rec room, or you could go back into the pilot barracks, and if you clicked on a bed, you would save, and if you clicked on the airlock, you would exit the game to DOS. So it was always trying to keep you in the fiction of the universe, and I think that was one of the strengths of Wing Commander, and it was one of the things that I've sort of taken with me with all my games I've gone. And the other thing that Wing Commander really tried to do is, at the time, it sort of pushed the technology. So we used VGA, which back then was amazing. It was 256 colors and 320 by 200. I mean, I don't even think Blackberries have got that lower resolution anymore. But at the time, it was pretty amazing, and we used extra memory, and so there's more than enough people that I run into over time that says, oh, well, I upgraded my computer just so I could play Wing Commander, and I wanted to figure out how to get the extra memory so I could see my legs in the cockpit and my hand on the joystick. And one of the things that it sort of taught me was that if you use the full power of the computer or the technology you're using, then you can sort of create a more compelling and a more immersive environment, because for me, the more realistic, or the more you can put someone in that location, the more that you feel part of that world, and the more you feel connected to the experience. And that is definitely something that's also true of movies, which I will get to in a little bit. So from there, I went to do Wing Commander 2, sort of the norm in science fiction epics is trilogies and things like that, which again was another example of us using new technology that came along. So we used sort of the Sound Blaster, which was this new sort of speech, like digitized sound card that came out, and we were the first game to really have sort of speech you had with the game. And so people were buying the game, buying the sound pack, because back then you had to have discs, couldn't download it, you couldn't do all the things you do now. You didn't have optical media, and they had characters speaking for the first time, and that was a pretty compelling experience for people. And round about then, that was when my father finally decided to stop bugging me about going back to university, and just in case this game fad thing went away, which was nice. But I have to say they did support me very nicely during the period of time. They just, my father's a university professor, so what can I say? He's much more traditional. In '93 was Strike Commander, which was another game again in the sort of same style where it puts you in the universe and immersive. And this time it was sort of in the Wing Commander style, but mercenary pilots flying F-16s in the near future, which I believe was like in the past now, but that's just what happens when you make a game in 1991 and release it in '93. And then after that, there's Wing Commander 3, which I think was one of the big landmarks, which was kind of what Jeff was talking about in terms of Wing Commander 4 and Wing Commander 3. Wing Commander 3 was the first game that we used real actors instead of sort of animated characters. So the Wing Commander 1 and Wing Commander 2 were much more like, I would say, Saturday morning cartoons. And Wing Commander 3, in the quest to make the story and the journey you're taking more emotional and for you to connect to it more, at the time, the technology of sort of rendering characters or 3D wasn't particularly strong on computers, so we went and shot real actors and then used that for the emotional sort of binding scenes between the action when you flew around in space to create much more of a sort of interactive movie experience. It was, Wing Commander 1 and Wing Commander 3 were probably the two of, my old games, the ones that I'm probably the proudest of. Wing Commander 3, set all sorts of records. I think it is the game that a lot of people, if they will tell you one of the most favorite Wing Commander games, it's Wing Commander 3, but you really did sort of feel like you were a star in a major Hollywood sort of science fiction epic blockbuster. And of course, it didn't hurt that Mark Hamill was playing the lead of the movie, of the game, I should say. By '95, the Wing Commander series had generated over $400 million of revenue for EA and Origin, which is not too bad for back in the old days. Today, it doesn't mean anything in the Call of Duty world, but this is 20 years ago. I carried on doing that. Wing Commander 4 we stepped it up again. We had actually a very short production cycle. And so instead of shooting on green screen and doing digital virtual sets, we actually built real sets and we shot on film. And it was actually very much like a film shoot. We had a 42-day shoot. And we actually, so it's sort of like a film shoot, but shooting more like a miniseries because you have much more material you have to shoot. And then you also have to shoot the different options of, okay, if things go well, then this is the scene that plays. If things don't go well, this is the scene that plays. And if you say this, then this response is played. So it was quite challenging. The actors were good fun, and I actually should have brought a few of the scripts, but the Wing Commander 3 script was about that thick as opposed to a normal feature script, and the Wing Commander 4 script was about 1,000 pages. So that was, it's always impressive that people can memorize the lines when you have that quantity. All right, so after Wing Commander 4, I decided that I wanted to sort of branch out from Origin Electronic Arts, and I left to start my own development company, which was called Digital Anvil, and Microsoft invested into that. And while I was at Digital Anvil, we created 2 more sort of space simulation games, Star Lancer and Freelancer, that are quite well known and regarded. And also while I did that, I directed the Wing Commander movie, which was my first experience actually directing a full feature, and I learned a lot during it because when making a feature is different than making a game, and there's a whole bunch of subtlety that film sort of teaches you that I wish I'd learned before I was making the movie. But that's just the way it works. But I had a lot of fun. I think I'm still the only video game creator that got to direct his own movie so far. So we'll see what happens down the road. And then after 18 years in the industry, I sort of was getting a bit burned out of doing computer games. The industry was sort of stagnating in my mind, and a lot of companies were sort of being consolidated in, being bought up by Electronic Arts, by Activision, by Microsoft, and Microsoft purchased Digital Anvil, and I sort of wanted to take a break and explore sort of movie making and sort of telling stories in that medium. So I figured it was as good a time as any. So at that point, I went into film. So, and grass is always greener on the other side of the tracks, by the way. But I wanted to explore the immersion of film and the fidelity of storytelling that sort of film allows you, because generally what film's very good at doing is sort of taking a very small story or character study and telling it with really great detail in a way that you can emotionally connect to it. And so I actually I had a lot of fun over 10 years making films. Did quite a few of them I'm fairly proud of, like Lord of War and Lucky Number 11, I think are pretty good, and Outlander's a fun sort of B sci-fi genre movie. And during that I got to do everything, so it was very informative for me. I'm sort of a hands-on creative person, and I much prefer the development and the production side of filmmaking to the deal-making side and the financing side and the casting side. But I did it all because that was part of what happened at my film company, and we worked closely with a German film fund that we helped place about $750 million into various productions around Hollywood. So I sort of got to understand how sort of big picture financing worked, which is also quite useful for game stuff, I think, and how to structure things, because films are specifically set up as individual sort of corporations for each film. And there was a lot of sort of good business learning that came there. And actually my current partner in Cloud Imperium, which is the company that's making Star Citizen, is the lawyer that worked with me on the German film deal. And so I made, and there's quite a few people from my film days that are actually working on Star Citizen now and bringing some of the knowledge and experience they had from film into the game. Saw the good, the bad, and the ugly of the film business. Don't know how many here are in the film business, but you'll know what that means when I say that. There's, it's a lot of fun, and it can be really frustrating as well. I'm always amazed, when you're in the industry and you realize how hard it is to make a film, that just getting a film made and released is an achievement in itself. Even if you say the film wasn't very good and all the rest of the stuff, just getting it there is like you've already in the top 1%. And then the fact that you can actually make a really great film, you should just bow down and say, wow. So I learned a lot, but ultimately wanted to connect with an audience in a sort of deeper fashion than I felt like I could with a 2-hour film. It sort of felt to me a certain level of, I want my big drive in doing anything I do, whether it was doing games or doing stories, is really about creating a world and a universe and going in it and getting lost inside it. And so those are the films I like the best, the ones where I sort of completely forget where I am and I'm lost. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a science fiction film. It could be something in the past. It could be a contemporary film, but I love getting lost in worlds. And I was feeling in the film business to a certain extent, especially recently, it sort of becomes hard to do that. I mean, it's sort of moving towards just this huge, you're either doing this formulaic big event movie, or you're on the other side where, you're making this, really sort of interesting, you want to call it art house movie. I mean, now it's art house movies. In the old days, maybe they would be studio movies, but no one's interested in sort of dramas. I mean, like I made Lord of War is a good example of a movie I made that would be almost impossible to get made in today's world in the film business. And it's kind of frustrating where I'm like, I want to build these worlds and I want to do this stuff and I want to sort of share that experience with the people that are experiencing the entertainment I'm building. And so I was sort of feeling that I wasn't having that experience as much in film as I wanted to, and I felt like I had 10 years before when I started the journey. And I was actually at the point in time I was playing, because I was always playing games while I was doing films, and I was starting to feel like more and more some of the games that I was playing were pulling me into the world. Naughty Dog have done some really great stuff with their Uncharted series, and there was some other games that I really played that sort of pulled me in, Mass Effect, and I was just sort of feeling like, wow, the realization came to me when I was watching Avatar. And I watched Avatar, and that was a world that I got immersed into. But I was like thinking, wow, that cost how much? $200+ million to put me in this world, and it took this long to get done. That's the movie that I had the experience of being immersed into. Whereas I've had 2 or 3 other game experiences this year that immersed me into the world as much. And so that was the moment in time where I started to feel like, well, perhaps I want to come back. I feel like the technology had moved along enough, and it would be interesting to go back and take everything I sort of learned and how I changed over those 10 years and come back into making games. So kind of here's what my insight is from operating in both games and in films. And let me take a quick sip here because talking I don't want to get dry throat. So films are an emotional medium for me. They're not a cerebral medium. It's how you connect to the characters, how an image makes you feel, the rhythm and the focus of the cuts. These are all things that sort of create an emotional feeling and connection with you in a film. And I think that, generally if you look at films, the films I think you respond the most to are the ones that have you feel emotional when you're watching versus ones that are much sort of cerebral and cut and dried, or at least it is for me anyway. Film achieves immersion by really having an extreme attention to detail. I mean, until you're on a film set, you don't, there's this thing that's called suspension of disbelief. And, when you make a film, you can go onto a set and, you can see a film that's set in today's world, and you watch it as someone that doesn't know the industry, and you go, oh, they just shot that in a hospital, or they just shot that in an office building. But actually, if you went to where they were shooting it, most likely it would be on a sound stage. The art department built that set. The scenic department came in, and they were painting the little scratches in, and they were making it look like it does in real life. And you light it just a certain way, and you shoot it just a certain way, and it looks like a real location, and therefore your disbelief is suspended, and you're in that place. And so the attention to detail that, and anyone that's worked on a film set tell you it's amazing the amount of people that are worrying about every tiny little detail, where everything's in the right place, there's continuity, all the props, how you've dressed everything. There's an attention to detail that most like games definitely haven't had in the past. I think now people are starting to do more of it, but it's what sort of makes you believe that you're in that place when you're watching the film. And I think that's very important, because once you remove that sort of, oh, I'm watching something, and you're just imagining yourself there, then it's much easier to connect with the characters and the story. And the other thing that I learned, and I wish that I sort of known this when I was first directing my first film, was that the small moments are the most the small moments and the little details can be the most powerful ones. I mean, generally, like and this was something that when I was producing first-time directors, from my own experience, I would be, like generally you look at a script, and a script's normally dominated by dialogue, and reality is that one look can say as much as a whole page of dialogue. And the directors that understand that, and the actors that understand that, I mean, you can have a great actor who will come into a scene and, bam, a whole page is gone with one look. Okay, I don't need that. And it happens all the time in the editing room too. The editing room, you think you need this dialogue, you're on the set, we need that. If we don't have that, no one's going to understand what's going to happen. And then you put something together in the editing room, and because of how the images go together and the sequence of events, all of a sudden, when you actually have that dialogue that you thought was critical for understanding how the story went, it seems really forced and on the nose, and you remove it, and you don't need it because the audience themselves understands it, and they sort of just assimilate it as they're going along. And so it's understanding that sort of these aspects, I think, are very important for someone to be a good filmmaker, and I also think they're very useful coming back into games. Now, games, on the other hand, they have some things going for them that films don't. I mean, obviously games are a medium of action, because the player actually controls his pace, as opposed to a film where, the pace is controlled by the editing. Also, the player is the protagonist of the story. And, yes, all games pretty much have stories. I mean, even Space Invaders is a story. Aliens are invading, you're defending it. Maybe very basic, but it generally has a story. But the important thing about that is that one of the biggest challenges when you make a film is to have the audience care about the characters, to care about the protagonist. And you don't necessarily even need to care, but you have to be interested in them. I mean, I'm sure all of you have seen films where you just don't like the characters, don't believe the characters, and you tune right out of it. And so the advantage you have in a game is that the main character is always you. And of course, you're going to care about yourself. So there are other challenges to make the world work, but that is definitely a head start that you get in a game. And then also player agency is really important, because the whole point of a game is you're in control. And so you need people to feel like they're in control, and they have the ability to sort of control their own destiny and affect it. And then they feel strong and important and heroic, if that's the kind of game you're making. So those are the sort of creative insights I had on films. This is the darker side, the business. So, right now, I actually think that sort of games and films are actually fairly close in sort of the big business side. You'd be surprised. I mean, the same kind of meetings that I was in on film, when I was going back to game and meeting with EAs of the world or whatever, is exactly the same stuff. It's just sort of this, I mean, essentially the big problem is that both a big budget AAA game or a big studio movie costs a lot of money to make, right? And it costs a lot of money to make because there's a limited audience out there, and there's a couple of big players, and they always want to give the advantage to, so let's spend $200 million on this movie, or let's spend $100 million on this game so we can put more explosions and more things in it and do all this extra stuff. And of course, once you spend a lot on a game, well, then you have to spend money to market it. You've got to spend money to manufacture it, and the same is generally true for films, because once you have a big investment, you want to protect it with marketing. You want to also put, in the case of games, especially in retail games, you have to manufacture it before you sell it. So if your break-even number is, say, 3 million units for a game, normally, say, a console game will be about $10 a unit to manufacture and license from, say, Sony and Microsoft. So you have to commit $30 million in cost of goods before you've sold one copy. And so that's pretty much one of the big reasons why most publishers don't take that many risks. They tend to want to do a sequel because they know they can sell 5 million or 10 million units. And that's also the same reason why big studios always sort of pick, okay, let's do another Marvel film, or let's do a superhero. I know this is a big franchise. It's easier, it's safer for them because they know there's a sort of built-in audience for it. And the other problem that you have with both businesses is there's a lot of people in the actual traditional sort of business model. They're along the food chain, so to speak. So there's a lot of people between you as the creator of a film or creator of a game and the final consumer of it, the audience member or the person playing it. So you've got, in the film things, you would have studios, and then you have sub-distributors, and then that's all going to get broken up because then it's going to the theaters, and then at some point you're going to have your DVDs and home entertainment sold. And so you have all these people that sort of go along the way that kind of get between you and your ultimate consumer. And the same happens in the game business. Is you've got the retailers as well as the publishers, and that can get more fragmented in various foreign countries where you don't have the same sort of reach that you may have in the US. And so that means that actually the amount of money you get on a per unit basis is also less. So again, that's another reason why you have to sell even more. So basically it's sort of a self-perpetuating thing where you spend more, you get less back because you've got this broken system to get it down, and you've also you spend more to insure it with the marketing and everything else. So essentially that means that most publishers now on the big level do not want to greenlight a game that they don't think will sell 5 million units or more. And that's hard. That's a hard bar to do. There's not very many. If you look at what happens every year, the amount of games that sell more than 5 million units, there would be probably less than 10 of them in a year basis. It's exactly the same in the big movie business where, like, okay, we're not interested unless we're doing $500 million of global box office. And so that means that you just don't have nearly as much risk-taking innovation that maybe you had in not that long ago, where the costs weren't as much, and so people could be willing to gamble. But right now, if you're a major studio, someone comes to you and says, here's a $10 million film, and you can make $30 million on it. That's a 3-to-1 ROI. The studio they don't care. They'll be like, it's not worth my time getting out of bed. I would much rather take a $200 million movie and make $100 million on it. That's how they want to use their money. And the same happens in the big publisher games that are made by sort of EA and Activision. And so that's kind of a bit of that's part of the darkness. So of course all this makes it easier to say no and take the safe path of known IP or sequels, which is what I'm talking about. Because of this sort of economics and the multiple layers, the game publishing and film studio model right now, in my opinion, are fairly inefficient. They're stagnant, and they're also disconnected from their audience. I think you're so removed from your ultimate audience, and you can't really respond to them because you're trying to do these big, huge global mass things that maybe sort of hits the lowest common denominator, but you can't really talk to individual audiences. And that's kind of a problem, because I think in the past, in film, in game, there's definitely be niches, like I was mentioning Outlander, which I thought was a fun B sci-fi movie. Well, those were bread and butter a long time ago. I watched Predator. It was awesome. The very first Alien, that is what that was. But those kind of movies don't really get made anymore because, again, they're not in that big blockbuster genre. So they're like, yeah, okay, we can make this movie. Pitch Black is another example of a movie that was made for a decent, $30 million, and it did a decent amount of box office. But most big studios wouldn't want to take the chance on that kind of return anymore because they're like, I'd rather do Hercules, and I know I'm going to get this much for my TV deals and home entertainment, and people love The Rock. So it's not the best for people doing creative. So here, in my mind, is what the opportunity is. as all the publishers and the studios focus sort of on the biggest, the lowest common denominator, and they're going for the big groups, there's definitely a group of consumers that feel like, hey, I want this kind of experience, I want this kind of game, I want this kind of film, and they're not getting it because they're getting fed the same stuff again and again. And from my standpoint, that's what really got me to start on Star Citizen, because that's how I felt. So, I love, obviously, space games. I've made a lot of them. And, I was sitting there, and I'd, left games for quite a while, and I was going, well, why aren't there more space games out there? Why, I don't understand it. I mean, space, it's optimism, it's hope, it's exploration, it's dreams. When I watched, it's just things that I felt when I was 8 and I watched Star Wars, or, all the science fiction that I watched, and it's sort of, that I used to read when I was a kid. You feel like there's worlds out there to explore. And so I was like, but there's a million military first-person shooters. I would really like to have this. And the other issue I had was, all my games have been for the various platforms, but primarily I always was a PC developer first and foremost. And so, the Wing Commanders were always foremost on PC. And the PC in general, while more expensive than a console, is generally much more technologically advanced, because its technology is changing every year. So if you want the best, most immersive graphics, it would be on PC, it won't be on a console. And I was feeling really frustrating because of these mass economics, the big publishers didn't want to they basically wanted to make a game that would work on an Xbox 360 and it would work on a PS3, and then they would just port it to a PC, even though the PC was significantly more powerful than the Xbox and the 360 and the PS3 at the time, because the console technology sort of gets released and it's pretty good technology, and then it's stagnant for about 7 years. Meanwhile, the PC is increasing, and then the console comes back up, and so this sort of happens all the time. And so most of the time the PC is well ahead of the console, and you're still paying $60 for a game, but you're not getting anything that's really showing off your hardware. And I was sort of feeling like, I want something that really shows off my hardware, like my old games used to, and I really want to go back and do a space game. And so that was the thing that really pushed me onto doing Star Citizen. And the other thing that was sort of making me feel that there was an opportunity was that the world sort of changed in how people connect and how they consume. I mean, it's not just in entertainment. You can sort of see it. You had the Arab Spring, and you have all this way where people sort of connect on social media, and you sort of have access to information, and it's sort of real time. And now if you look at things like Twitch, which we're streaming on Twitch, people watch other people play games, and so people sort of consume and look at media in very different ways than they used to in the past, which was sort of a much sort of slower pace. And you can absolutely reach the individual people that want to play your game or watch your film in a way that you couldn't do, say, 10 or 15 years ago. And so that felt like there was a really great opportunity. Obviously, on the game side, everyone was sort of moving to digital distribution, especially on the PC. And so you didn't need the same, you didn't need the same power of a publisher to go into retail, to put you into a box and get you out there on the store shelves. And so there's an opportunity to both talk to and connect with the individuals out there in a way that maybe you couldn't have done 5 or 10 years ago. And so I sort of felt like, well, that's a real great opportunity to connect directly to this consumer base, and maybe there's people out there like me that like this kind of game, that want it on this kind of format, and and if I do it in this structure, I don't necessarily need to sell as many copies as EA or Activision and so on like that does. So I can perhaps make a business that is sustainable, but I have an audience of 500,000 instead of 5 million, and that was kind of the thought. So this is kind of where it was for me, where it was sort of inverting the paradigm of what you normally approached it with. So and I've just talked about a fair amount of this, where about being able to connect directly with the audience and develop a direct relationship. In some ways, you actually don't really even need to know whether people want your title or not. I mean, like one of the examples that we actually did on Star Citizen is before I launched the crowdfunding campaign, we launched basically a sort of teaser site to say, hey, look, I'm going to come back and do something. I haven't necessarily, I'm not telling you what it is just yet, but if you guys like my games, you like space sims, let's all hang out in this community and let's talk about it, and I'll sort of share some stories about some stuff I've done in the past and tease about this thing I did. And we got 10,000 people signing up in the first day, and by the time we did the announcement for Star Citizen, which was 30 days later, we'd had about 30,000 people sign up. And that's actually a really great way to know that people actually care about what you're going to go and do. And that wouldn't be possible 10 years ago. I mean, that's all sort of enabled by what you can do with social media, online, the web, and all the rest of the stuff. So you can use that relationship with your audience member, game player, consumer to help tell you what the demand is, and they can also sort of give you their feedback of what they like and what they don't like, and I think you can sort of have a much more intimate relationship with the people that are going to be experiencing the content you're making, which is really important. Things for me that were sort of things that I was looking at that helped me sort of form this opinion was Minecraft and League of Legends, which are those are great examples of two games. Neither of them from big publishers. I mean, Notch was a guy by himself that said, hey, I'm done this interesting sort of brick building game and it's super basic, and if you give me 18 euros, I'll carry on working on and adding features for it. And that just sort of grew and grew and grew until he basically sold it for $2.5 billion to Microsoft. So that's pretty good. He didn't have anyone backing him before he sort of reached his critical mass. League of Legends, which is the most popular game in the world, I think there's something like 70 million people that sort of signed up and play the game. That was done by Riot Games, who were not a known publisher at the time. It was sort of a venture capital funded startup, and they said, hey, we really like this community mod called Defense of the Ancients. Let's commercialize that and make it and have people play that online. And they sort of built it, and they sort of went out online and gave it out for free, and they built up their base. And so both those two games reached directly to the people that were going to play them and had that intimate relationship and built a business based on that. And that sort of was sort of is the precursor that's going, okay, well, there is a change in the industry that you can take advantage of because of the way media is now and how you can connect. And so that was the inspiration for when I was going to come back and do Star Citizen, which you're probably bored of me talking, so we're going to play a little video here, and then I will talk about it. So that's a trailer we actually debuted just before Christmas, which is kind of about the promise of what Star Citizen is going to be. Because the idea with Star Citizen is that, I mean, first of all, it's the game I've kind of always wanted to make, but the technology hasn't really been there to allow me to do it, and now it's finally at the point that you can. But it's an open world game, or an open universe game would be the best way to say it, where you can go from planet to planet, location to location. It's all in first person, so it's in extreme fidelity in first person, like a AAA first person game, like you would get Call of Duty or something. But you can fly various spaceships of various different sizes, so you and your friends could crew a much bigger ship, or you could just be flying a smaller fighter, and basically the galaxy is your oyster. You can go around. If you always dreamed of being Han Solo and going from planet to planet and doing deals, you can do that. Or if you want to be a bounty hunter, you want to be a pirate, you want to be just an explorer and find new worlds, all that gameplay is in there. It's a sort of open sandbox environment. So we sort of call it a first-person universe. So it's not, in some ways it's almost gone beyond the games that I've done in the past and most of the other games in the genre, in that you have that level of fidelity. When you land on a location, it's up there in incredible first-person detail, and you can go where you want to go. Obviously it has pretty high production values, I'm really trying to bring that sort of film-level attention to detail that I talked about earlier to the game. And it's like I said, one of the reasons I came back was the technology felt like it moved along enough that I could actually create that world with the immersion that I'd always wanted to do. And so I sort of feel like the things that I did in games at the beginning and the things that I did in film have sort of led up back to the point where we're here with Star Citizen. So there's sort of two approaches that I had when I was starting this out. First, if sort of some of the games I've done in the past, I've generally liked to push it and be fairly ambitious about what we're doing. So get the technology to sort of create a sense of place and time and immersion that that puts you there. With all the basically the power of the computers when I was last making games and what you can do now, it's sort of night and day. I mean, my iPhone is more powerful than the PCs that I was working on back in like the late 90s. So I can create a much more immersive experience with this. And all of this for me, it's important to harness into an emotional experience. So that Imagine trailer is really about the emotion of like the idea of going anywhere you want to be, being anywhere you want to, being anyone you want to be and see any place you want to see. And I think that's kind of one of the keys where I want to sort of take the technology and be able to create an emotional experience where you have an emotional response when you're flying around in the universe, when you're adventuring around. And it's not really about, oh, I'm going to compete to get to level 20. It's just like, I want people in this universe to go to different planets and sightsee. I want them to come and bring souvenirs back from them and treat it almost like you would the real world. So I wanted to make the best damn space sim ever, which was my stated objective from the beginning. We got a long way to go, but hopefully with the support of the amazing community we have and the really talented team that we've got working on this, we'll be able to do that. So then the other aspect, and this is I think one of the biggest keys to Star Citizen's success, is the fact that we're incredibly community focused. So right from the beginning, I mentioned that we started with a community site before we even announced Star Citizen. We had 30,000 people sign up, and people were sharing and their stories and talking about the games they liked and what they like in science fiction. And it's built into the DNA of Cloud Imperium, who's the company that's making Star Citizen, is the community focus. And and a lot of people, we get headlines because we're the largest crowdfunded anything in the world. We're now close to $70 million. And it's likely to carry on. We'll probably be over 100 by the time the game's actually, close to sort of public release. But it's not, the community. It's not the crowdfunding isn't really about the money. Yes, the money is nice. Yes, the money enables you to do some of these things you do. But it's really about bringing people in to create this community and have them sort of share that experience with you as you're building it. And that's one of the sort of key differences that I think we do on Star Citizen that's very different than most other games out there, is that really spend a lot of time making sure that our community is part of the process, seeing us, as we build it, we're sharing things with them. We're sharing kind of, what we're going to be doing with the fiction, what we're doing with some of the gameplay mechanics, how we're designing some of the ships, and we actually are also sharing builds, which I will get to in a bit. But the community is definitely, one of our biggest pillars, because we are dealing directly with the community, obviously the old publishing funding model isn't necessary there, because we have this community that's so invested. They are basically saying, yeah, you know what, we love this idea, we love this vision, and we want you to build this universe because we want to adventure around in it. And it's like a big team that's doing it. So not everybody's getting to program the space physics or all the rest of the stuff, but I think most people in the community feel like they are a part of making Star Citizen happen. And it's a very different relationship than you would get in a traditional game setting, in terms of I finish a game, you don't know anything about it, and then it comes out, and then you buy it as someone in retail it's a sort of buyer-seller relationship, whereas what we have going right now in Star Citizen is a very different relationship. It's a sort of kind of communal relationship in terms of us all focusing to achieve this common goal together. And I think that's really, really important. We really go out of our way to use all the various social channels to engage everyone and keep people involved and informed in a way that you can do now that you couldn't do in the past. So, just a little background. I mean, when we started out, we're 100% community funded. We, originally were going to, the plan originally was that I was going to take out this demo that I'd worked on a prototype for about a year and had self-funded that. And I was going to take that out to crowdfund to prove that people still wanted to play a space game and there was a demand to it, because, generally, investors and publishers are very sort of nervous about things that aren't in vogue at the moment. And so this was a way that I thought, okay, well, if I go out there and I can raise at least $2 million, then I'll show that there's a bit of a demand, and then I can close these investor deals that I had lined up. And so we went out and we thought, okay, we'll pitch to, the fans of my old games, Wing Commander, Privateer, Freelancer, PC gamers who were feeling like no one was paying attention to them, making games just for them, and people who want to just adventure, love space games, adventure out in vast virtual worlds. So that's kind of who we targeted. The original goal was $2 million. We went out in October 10th, 2012. We did a sort of a live stream event with GameSpot, who's one of the bigger sort of gaming portals on the web, at GDC Online, which was in Austin, Texas. That went fantastic. I mean, at the very beginning it didn't go fantastic because we built our own site instead of using a pre-built site like Kickstarter, with the idea to keep our community all a game. So everything's built vertically integrated for the community, and I spent a lot of money on the prototype, but I didn't spend a lot of money on the web programming, and it crashed under the demand. So we had panic while we sort of retrofitted it and got it up and running, and then also Kickstarter was nice enough, and so we also had a Kickstarter campaign that ran on parallel as well as our own website, and we finished the original sort of funding campaign that was lined up with Kickstarter in November, with about $6.2 million, of which 2.1 was on Kickstarter and 4.1 was on our own site. And then after that, we sort of realized we really needed to invest in the platform for the community. And so instead of this WordPress site that we'd used, which was the one that had crashed, we went out, rolled our sleeves up, and we actually invested in building a custom platform. That, the thing that we do very well is, and it's one of the things that I think makes this work well on the community aspect, is our platform is basically built for everything. The community can hang out there, they can download the game, they can read fiction about the game, they can get updates from us. If they want to back and pledge, they can do it on the site. So you only have to go to one site. It's one site, everything for Star Citizen, so it's completely sort of integrated for that. And I think that's one of the things that helps out, because again, the DNA of the company and the project is being very community focused, and so we're definitely trying to make sure that we make it as easy as possible for people to hang out, and we're continuing to invest in adding features that are community driven in the game, because I think in the kind of game that Star Citizen is, which is a game that people want to adventure around in this universe, and potentially for a long, long time, you need to give a robust platform. And one of the one of the nicest things about what happens, when we do a lot of events that are sort of fan driven, and one of the nicest things that I do is, you meet people and they're like, hey, this is I made this friend in a organization on Star Citizen, and so I have lots of people that are like, oh, I made this friend, or hey, we're together and we wouldn't have known each other if we hadn't met online on the forum for Star Citizen. Now we hang out in person and we've got like interests, and it's actually kind of cool because it's sort of bringing people together socially in a way that you wouldn't have guessed, which is actually kind of fun. So we sort of doubled down on our sort of community-focused website, and over time, we sort of by the end of 2013, we were at $35 million raised. And at the end of by now we're almost at $70 million. I think whenever this was captured a day or so ago, that's where we're at. So we will hit 70 pretty soon. Because we're so community driven, it's this constant communication. Like one thing that we do is we always, like every day, we have web posts and updates, and we actually have a fairly sizable community team that all they do is work on helping get content to share with the community, because we have a lot of developers working on stuff, but getting stuff in a format that you can put on the web and show to people takes time and effort. And so we have people that are dedicated for shooting the video shows, that are people that are sharing the content, and it's all to try our best to involve everybody on the community side. Transparency, in our mind is critical. So we try to share as much as we possibly can of what we're doing. Sometimes it's not enough for every member of our community, because we still get accused of not being transparent enough, even though we literally publish these monthly reports from every one of our studios that goes into more detail than any report I ever did for a publisher when I was working back at EA or Microsoft. But you can never please everybody all the time. And then the other big thing that we sort of decided when we sort of saw how successful the engagement was in the community and how excited the community was one of the other things that I think is quite revolutionary about what we're doing with Star Citizen is we sort of decided to, because it was such a big game and because it had, it was so complicated, that we felt like, well, it's going to take a while to get all this together into one package. And, we've got this really excited community, and if we just go and make this without engaging them and keeping them interested, they're going to tune out after, this thing's going to take 3 to 4 years to do. And, in today's world, everyone's got it's ADD. It's like, oh, something bright shiny over here, something bright shiny over here. So, our goal was like, we really need to figure out how to engage our base every single day, make it fun, make this experience for them, watching us build a game as fun as what, ultimately playing the game was. And so one of the things we decided to do was sort of share parts of the game as we built it with the community so they could play it, give us feedback. And again, that's all about that sort of engagement where people can they're playing something early enough that their opinions can affect the outcome. Like traditionally in the game business, big publishers will say, oh, here's the beta. And usually the beta is something that comes out a month before the actual game is going to hit the stores. And everyone knows you can't really affect it. You can't really change the balance of something or fix things that are really broken. And so it's more sort of like a preview to get people ready to buy it. Whereas in our case, we're far out enough that people can give their opinions, and it can affect some of the directions we take. And people have actually already seen it. So we released Arena Commander 1.0 just before Christmas, the first iteration of the sort of space dogfighting module, which is currently just for the single-seater ships. Came out in June of last year. And during that course, we had, I think, something like 27 updates where we were constantly iterating, adding new features, new ships, new stuff in, and changing things based on what we saw the players were doing, what the feedback was, and it's not that they tell us what to do, it's sort of we use the relationship with our community as like the world's biggest sounding board. A lot of times, marketing companies will spend money on a sort of targeted sort of marketing research group. Well, we've got hundreds of thousands of people that, are really happy to give us their opinions, and that's actually a really great asset that we use. Our original module that we shared was the hangar module, which allowed you to go in the hangar, in the engine, see the ships that you'd pledged for and walk around them, and then the next stage was the dogfighting module. And so this for backers, because they've seen all these other videos, this is a little trailer for Arena Commander 1.0 that no one's seen yet, so we will play this here. that's sort of a preview. I mean, well, basically, it's right now you can play that. It's the dogfighting part of the game, and actually, in some ways, you could, not for what we're doing for Star Citizen, but someone could have released that as an actual game itself. In going to sort of what I talk about by trying to be in fiction, Arena Commander is sort of the in-fiction simulator in our universe. So pilots, so in the universe when they go on an adventure out there, they can lose their ship, and there's a pretty high stakes to flying out there and getting attacked by pirates. Whereas in Arena Commander, you can go into the simulation mode and basically hone your skills as a pilot before you're going out into the live universe. And so we've sort of had a few fun things with it. Arena Commander is sort of a nod to Wing Commander, and the company that made Arena Commander is Original Systems, which is a nod to Origin Systems. And it's sort of the idea of sort of the in-fiction things that we try to do to pull you into the world all the time. But we will basically be growing Arena Commander over time, where we add in the ships where it's more than one person flying it. You can have multiple people flying it, and it's sort of the test bed for all the space action that will be in Star Citizen. And we have other modules that I will talk towards the end of this that come out. So, I've been droning on about talking to the backers a lot, but we have communication constantly with them. We do live streams. I mean, this is getting live stream right now. We do regular community-driven events. So we go to sort of consumer-focused game events like PAX Prime, PAX East, sort of Penny Arcade. It's sort of an expo where gamers can get together and play. Gamescom, which is sort of I think the biggest game show in the world, which is in Germany. That's in August. And we try our best to put events on where people that are part of the community then come to and mingle with other members of the community, and we sort of give them reveals and show stuff and make them feel part of the team, essentially. Like I said, we have monthly newsletters. We have a 50 to 70 page magazine that we publish every month that has in-depth detail on how different ships are built, what game mechanics are happening, different areas in the star system, and has fiction. We have weekly sort of around the verse news show. I do a small video segment where I answer 10 questions every month that have been sent in by subscribers, which are sort of a subset of our backers that contribute money every month to allow us to do this enhanced community content. So we actually have some pretty amazing members of our community that put money up every month to allow us to do enhanced community content, which is actually really an awesome thing. And then we did last year this thing called the Next Great Starship, which was, if you want to think about it, it's sort of like American Idol, but for someone designing and building a spaceship, which was kind of fun. And that ship was built and they won, and we actually the ship was released to backers in November, I think, or maybe it was a bit before. And it was one of our best. It was one of our best sort of selling ships, so to speak, which was great because it brought more money in for production for the game. We constantly just feed content all the time, and I think that's very important. We also really go out of our way to build systems inside the game. We're building stuff for the community to reporting the bugs, creating content for the subscribers they could have in their hangar, management so people can manage their groups together, their organizations, which ultimately is sort of like a big sort of friends management list where you can have multiple, okay, here's my mercenary guild, and here's my merchant guild, and here's my own trading corporation, and get your friends to join and run a little business in space if you want to do. We do fun things like we had a nice little mini game when we had an explorer ship, and the web team, because everybody on our project are pretty much game geeks and sci-fi geeks, and so the web team's always wanting to do really cool stuff. So they've done, now on the website you can actually see the ships in 3D and rotate around them and see the various ships in the game. And they did this really fun mini game for one of the explorer ship that came out last year, which was kind of fun. We do fictional updates all the time, so we sort of enhance the background, the Bible of the universe, so to speak. We let our backers try ships out. So this weekend we had sort of try the Mustang ship out, which is one of our sort of lower end starter ships, but it's quite fun to fly. We also sort of, I think, go the extra mile in terms of how we. We go well beyond what I think a traditional publisher would do in terms of supporting and interacting with the community. We allow the community to talk to the backers. We have actual forum sections where anyone in the community can ask questions of engineering or graphics, or, you know, okay, I want to know how the physics system works here, and we actually have a schedule for our team members where they got to spend a little bit of time answering questions that come in from the community. So again, increasing the engagement. And you know, we even have a concierge service for people that you know, need extra help on customer service, because you know, we've got most of the people that have backed the game have only got one ship, but we do have some people that have got more than one ship. You know, I think the most we've got is someone's got 50 ships or something crazy. And you know, in those cases, that gets more complicated in terms of, oh, I want to get rid of this ship and I want to do this ship instead and do all that. And so we actually have an extra level of customer service that you know, basically helps them out, and that makes all that easy to happen in a way that you wouldn't necessarily get at a sort of big publisher. You know, I mentioned already forums for the disciplines and module. So all this is feeding into is, like, you know, really engaging the community. So I think you'll be getting bored of the community at this point. But you know, I think that you know, all the things I've talked about community are really important, and if you manage to do that, you don't need to spend the kind of money. And this is sort of I think a takeaway that you can take beyond Star Citizen is, if you engage your sort of, I don't know what you want to call them, your super fans, you know, because this could apply to movies as well as games. But if you can engage on this kind of basis, on a more sort of social basis, you don't need to do the sort of big blanket TV advertising that, you know, traditional films and traditional games tend to do. They just, you know, here's $50 million, here's $100 million, and I'm going to blanket it during the Super Bowl, and you know, that's good for raising awareness. But I think, you know, in today's world, you can be much more targeted in reaching out to the people that really care about the thing you're making, and so that's where a community-focused effort can really make a difference. And you know, the other thing that you get with the community is they're your biggest supporters, they're your evangelists. So when you go out and they're invested in this dream, and they want their friends to be invested in this dream, and so it's sort of this grassroots movement. And so in some ways, you know, using your community, you know, and crowdfunding is sort of a grassroots way to create you know, content that maybe wouldn't be able to create it in another format. Okay, so I'll be impressed if everyone can remember or if they notice all the chapter headings from The Hobbit, by the way. So this is just going to be some more development-centric stuff, so may or may not be interesting to people. But you know, we have a very our development is different because of the open manner that we use it in, and kind of how we release stuff. So you know, it's an ambitious game. You know, over here, if you see up on the thing, you see the Arena Commander where I talked about, the hangar. You know, we have the first-person shooter part of the game, which is the first person going around. You actually saw some of the shots in the Imagine trailer of that. We demoed that in PAX Australia the end of October of last year, and that's going to go live in end of March of this year, where backers will get that, and now they'll be able to run around on foot and shoot each other and fight each other as well. Planet side, which is sort of walking around the planet. You saw a bit of that when the ship was landing and people walking around in like bars and stuff. So there's going to be the first stage of that also around the end of March, beginning of April. Squadron 42, which is the one area that I haven't really sort of talked about, is the single-player narrative game that's put inside this universe. Squadron 42 is very much like a Wing Commander game in terms of it has a definitive narrative, it has a story arc, and it's using like everything we can possibly use on the cutting edge to really create an emotional story. And we're using sort of very cutting edge performance capture techniques, and so all the same kind of stuff that's happening on the next Avatar. We're actually partnering with a company called Imaginarium in the UK, and that's Andy Serkis's company. They're very performance focused, and we're actually doing some joint R&D with them to try and you know, do the best we possibly can to capture like movement and emotion in the face. And we're pushing like we haven't shown it yet, but like our characters in terms of the rig of the faces. You know, the goal is to try and really deliver. You know, it's not going to get there yet. It's going to take a while, but increase the emotional impact or capacity that you can have in the game. We've got some other ideas of how to change the dynamic of interacting with other characters, where it's about managing your relationship with other characters aboard in Squadron 42, you're in the military, you're serving aboard a carrier, and you sort of end up getting cut off behind enemy lines. And it's, if I was going to give you the Hollywood pitch, it would be sort of Gladiator meets the Ninth Legion meets Heart of Darkness. But it's it has an opportunity for like some kind of fun stuff, and we're trying some stuff out that hasn't been done in games before, and I'm hoping it, part of it's from my experience from films. It's also I have a fair number of people that I brought back with me into games that worked with me on films, and so trying to come with it a slightly different angle of not the traditional way that you've seen in games for some of the emotional stuff. And then finally, the persistent universe. And the persistent universe is that sort of dream of war, going from planet to planet, doing whatever you want. And that's the sort of open sandbox you can venture around in. And the sort of first beginning iteration of that will be towards the end of this year, with everything sort of all coming together into one full package, towards the end of 2016. But to build something that's got this level of fidelity and ambition, obviously, takes a lot. Right now, I think we have about 320 people working on the project. There's about 180 to 200 people that are on staff that are working on it, and the rest we have several developers and contractors that work with us. So we have a group that works in Denver, Colorado, a group that works, or two groups that work up in Montreal, and then we have individual contractors that work on it. So it's definitely a big team. So here's the setup of the stuff. We actually have 4 internal studios now. So we have one here in Los Angeles. There's about 45 people here in Los Angeles, mostly all the corporate stuff, and we also focus on development in terms of the space and the dogfighting stuff. We have Austin, Texas, and they're focusing on the big persistent universe. There's about 56 people there. Foundry 42 in the UK is doing the single-player game, and there's actually over 80 people there. And Ilphonic, who's in Denver, are working on the first-person part, and then we have other parts of our internal people also working on the first-person. Behavior is another developer in Canada. They're working on the planet side stuff, which is all the locations you get to visit. So they're pretty art-heavy. And then Turbulent is the company that's built our platform, our custom platform for us on the website, and they're really great. And then we have a new office that we're just actually opening up in Germany. And our sort of model on development is we sort of go where the talent is, as opposed to having one location and bringing all the talent to your place, which takes a lot longer to ramp up. And also, our goal is, because this is such a huge game with so many aspects, it can be fairly overwhelming. So the idea is that you end up having one team, they just work on the space stuff. This team works on the FPS. This team works on the planet side stuff. And so they don't have to worry about the whole massive amount, and they can focus on making their area as good as they possibly can. And they can do it with less than the 400 or 500 people that you would need if everyone was in one location. So that is our sort of development methodology. Definitely has challenges because we're distributed around the world. We use a lot of online, cloud kind of stuff, collaborative stuff. Some of the stuff comes from the film business. We use, for instance, Shotgun, which is something that's used a lot in sort of visual effects and animation for sort of online collaboration and markup and write on sort of shots and visual effects. But so far, I would say that in the balance of things, I think it works quite well. It keeps the different teams sort of focused and not too sort of big and monolithic. But proof's in the pudding. We'll see how you'll see if I say that in 2 years' time. Now, the other thing that I think is kind of important to recognize, and this is kind of a bit of a difference, although maybe not so much of a difference between film, is that there certainly is sort of games as a lifestyle kind of aspect that happens where people love this universe and they want to spend time and come back again and again to it. So, I guess you could say the same would be true of Star Wars, or the same would be true of, say, the Marvel universes and stuff like that. But it's different in what we're doing, because this is not a experience where you will just play it for a week and then put it down. The idea is that you'll come into the game and this is your character, it's your alter ego, and you'll venture around. And there are World of Warcraft's obviously a very well-known example of something that's an ongoing universe. But if things all go right in this universe, we're planning to build something that hopefully will last for many years' time, and will constantly sort of grow and evolve the world and the story and the things that happen inside it. And the goal of the actual game is to make a sort of living, breathing universe that reacts to what the player base do. And the players themselves have a certain amount of agency inside that world, and they can affect the outcome of certain events inside it, and they can affect the economy. And they can maybe sort of rewrite some of the boundaries on maps in the universe. And that's one of the things that we're not there yet. We're building the tools to be able to do that, and that's something I think is incredibly interesting. And to do that, we're very focused on having a community that keeps on engaged and doing that. And actually, one of the things that's nice, if you ever would look at all I can't remember how many millions of forum posts we have. We got some ridiculous number, but the amount of input actually from our community in terms of their ideas and fan fiction and stuff, it's fantastic. So and in some ways, on our development base, we actually pay attention to that, and if we see something that we like, we occasionally will engage and say, hey, let's bring that into the world, which I think works well. So this is for people that want to do games and kind of want to build something that can constantly sort of engage people. I think new content's really important for it. You've got to constantly provide new content for people to keep engaged. So yes, when the game's done, new content, but as I mentioned before, we do new content every single week. Right now, we drop new patches every 2 weeks, so we update the build. We either add new assets, we fix bugs, improve systems. We do that. We're giving them new content in terms of new updates about the fiction, updates about what's happening. So new content is very, very, very important. I think having sort of immersion and storylines in a sort of living universe is very important too, where players feel like they can actually affect things, and as they do things, it changes the storyline, and they sort of feel an association and an impact into that world that they wouldn't necessarily have in, say, some other worlds. Because you certainly can get the what people call the theme park ride in a sort of online game, where it's no matter what, it's always the same experience, and if you come back, it's the same boss sitting in the same castle. It doesn't matter, and that's not really the goal of what we're trying to do in Star Citizen. And then iterative improvement, and this is one of the things I think is really important. It's one of the things that the model that we're using really allows us to do, is we are constantly, as I've mentioned, fixing and iterating and making things better as we go along, based on the feedback that we're getting. And we can see real time kind of where people are, where they're dying, what things work well, what things don't work well, and we can adjust. And we actually have the time to iterate. And this is why when people ask me, are you worried if Star Citizen's, you've all these expectations, all this money, what if Star Citizen's not very good? And I'm like, well, it's, we constantly, we have this feedback loop. So as long as we have an engaged community and as long as we have the time to do this, we will make a good game, because it's kind of hard with this much feedback to not, constantly iterate and improve. And, I think any creative will tell you that one of the reasons why stuff doesn't work a lot of times is because you sort of are forced to get it out before you're ready. You haven't had enough time to hone that cut, or haven't had enough time to balance that level. And so the iteration is really important, and the fact that we can iterate so early in the process is definitely a huge trump card that we have, that I would say a lot of other games don't necessarily have, because in the traditional manner is you do this completely hidden out of sight, and then the very last 6 months you start to show people your game, and then bam, it's out there in retail. And if you'd miscalculated, well, then you have to fix it on the sequel. And with us, we can sort of we can adjust things as we go along. And that's actually really powerful. So other areas, the player management, the community management. I'm not going to bore you with all the stuff, but one thing is that we have 24,000 organizations already in Star Citizen, which is a pretty amazing number. And the largest has over 10,000 members in them. So that already sort of shows you how engaged people are and how people are getting their groups together and plotting how to take over the universe. Immersion, we want, I think a lot of the people that have backed Star Citizen want to sort of exist or live in this, this future world and adventure around in it. And so we really go out of our way to sort of put everything in context of the universe. I mean, even on our website, we've sort of themed it to be like the website of this futuristic spaceship manufacturer, and we sort of do a lot of in-context stuff, which I mentioned. The Arena Commander is sort of an in-fiction simulation, and I think I'll get to it later, but we do sort of the kind of marketing we do, like viral videos. We do like ship commercials, but they're sort of ship commercials done by the manufacturer in 900 years in the future. So it's not sort of an overt, hey, here's a commercial, get the ship. It's sort of like, oh, here's Robert Space Industries in 2945 selling you on their new version of the Aurora. And that's kind of fun. So this is where I'm sort of talking about all the things that I just talked about. Here again, all our community content stuff. And I just talked about the commercials. So I think, maybe one thing that would be interesting is we're going to show an example of it. So since this is BAFTA, I thought it may be appropriate. We sort of have fun with these commercials because we sort of parody, a very sort of somber, serious BMW ad, or which is, we have these different manufacturers in our universe. So Origin is the sort of equivalent of BMW, and RSI is probably the equivalent of sort of General Motors or something. So one of the ones that we did was sort of a parody of, because, we're sort of making our ships almost like cars. It was a parody of Top Gear, and we called it Galactic Gear. And it was the M50, which we'll just run this. Now, it's not the 300i commercial, though, it's the M50 commercial.
MISC freelancer. Built for life.
Now, over the last few years, Origin has become more known for looking fast than any sort of actual speed. Take the 300i. A ship that brags about its extra comfy beds isn't exactly what you want when you're looking for a racer. However, all is not lost. Origin has just written us an apology letter. Meet the new M50. Space. The best ships gracefully dance across its expanse. The worst clumsily plod across its face. The new M50 doesn't have time for any of that. Instead, it simply slices its way through. The 2944 M50 was designed with one goal in mind: make the ship that will win the next Murray Cup. The surprising thing is, Origin may have just about done it. The stats are an orgy of mind-bending numbers, but it comes down to two things: less weight and more power. You'll notice that the nose cone has grown what I can only describe as a moustache, added to stabilise all the additional thrust that the retooled and updated twin-hammer HM 4.3 drives spew out. And the refinement doesn't stop there. They've narrowed the front fuselage, moved the wings forward for better balance, shaved the cockpit view pane down to the thinnest it could still be, and not shatter in your face. The result? A pure flying machine. Each movement on the stick translates directly into unadulterated throttle action. Welcome back to the glory days of flying. That's all well and good, but when you're talking about a racing machine, at the end of the day, you really have to, well, race it. And who better to prove the M50's mettle than the last Origin ship to actually manage a cup win, the 350R. Piloting the 350R is Galactic Gear's very own two-time cup holder, Timo Bakshi. Flying the M50, an incredible man who, for some inconceivable reason, has never won a single Murray Cup. Me. This, my friends, is going to be good.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I keep trying to push the limits, but I can't find the limits! Origin, you hear me? Apology accepted! Apology accepted!
And the commercials are kind of fun. They also, by the way, have a development purpose, because all the assets that you've seen in all these, like the commercials and the pre-rendered stuff, is all game assets. So we don't build specific stuff for marketing. Those are actually all game environments, game assets. And then, so we kind of use both the frequent patches to get out that are public facing and the, say, the ship commercials as sort of milestones for our team that they have to get their content done by. And so it's actually something that's quite useful in a game that's as big and as expansive as Star Citizen, where it's very easy, you could work on this thing for 4 or 5 years and not ever have to show everything, and you would tend not to finish all your assets to the final quality, and then at the very end you'd have this huge rush to fix everything. And so we sort of have tried to have a cadence where we're forcing the team to finish off an asset or a ship to make sure that it can be used for a commercial or used in the game. It's sort of like when I was a kid, I used to be terrible. I never cleaned my room, and it just became this awful mess. And then at some point, it clicked in me that if I cleaned up as I went along, it was actually quite easy. And so now I'm fairly, I clean up as I go along, and I don't have this nasty mess that I would see. But that's kind of the way I view that. Is it's sort of as long as you're getting the job done, finishing the assets up, and and whenever you make it public facing where someone's going to see it, every artist in the world oh, I got to make it great. It's got to be great because people are going to see it. So we actually use that as a device for our sort of development milestones and stuff. So I mentioned before I was used my film experience. We use a lot of film production design technique on the film. A huge amount of the top sci-fi concept artists are actually working on Star Citizen. A fair number of them are also working on Star Wars at the moment too. In designing a universe, you need to design the look of it, and so obviously, getting people that are great at sort of building that out and sketching that out is really important. And so it's worth it to invest. And there's definitely a skill base there that is fantastic. We use a lot of film and visual effects production processes for efficiency at managing sort of large distributed groups. I mean, the visual effects business now already does a lot of that because they, it's kind of sad, but there's a lot of people over in Asia or India that are working on visual effects, collaborating with, say, ILM here. ILM does a lot of its base model building out, not in San Francisco. They do it elsewhere, and then they finish off the effects and light the effects in San Francisco. And that's purely a cost reason because they have to compete with other houses that have lower costs. And so we use a lot of the same sort of processes and tools in terms of managing because we have distributed groups. Same on sort of the story development and script, stuff that I get. I'm working with a lot of people that I work with in my film business to try and upgrade the level of writing that you would see in a game. And then I mentioned working with Imaginarium and sort of what we're trying to do on performance capture. So we're actually investing in trying to go to the next generation. And by the way, the Galactic Gear commercial, that wasn't any of that. So he was kind of hand animated versus being proper performance captured with a proper rig on his face. So the new stuff I think will be quite good. All right. So this is the boring technology stuff. Which probably is not that interesting to everyone, but we are using, and this probably isn't that great of a takeaway for, general sort of takeaway about what would be good about community, engaging in community and how you could be using something for crowdfunding, but it's a bunch of numbers and it's kind of fun occasionally. So we have 30 terabytes of assets already built for the game. I mean, there'll be a lot more as we go along. It's the same amount of, we had 11 million copies of the original Wing Commander. It's about that much in just assets for our one thing. Our backplane, I mean, our current systems up there with what they did on Avatar. We have 330 terabytes of SSD storage that we're using, a petabyte of magnetic storage. We have global gigabit for all the offices because the amount of data we push around, everyone has to be at least on gigabit. We have 887,000 files in source control, which if anyone on my, you talk to anyone on my team, everyone will complain about how long it takes to update stuff on Perforce. We're starting to build the back end for the online service. I think Google Compute is sort of who we've decided to go with. We have about 400 CPUs working on that, and that's going to scale significantly, probably about 4,000 or 8,000 by the time we have the Persistent Universe up and running, which has a 45 gigabyte fiber network connecting to all the game servers. We do 6 game builds a day. I mean, it's a massive production that we're doing. We've already done 6,000 builds of Star Citizen, which is a pretty insane amount. You know, people already, as I've mentioned before, you know, you can play aspects of the game. Arena Commander, there's been, you know, 2 million sessions over and 1 million hours already played on it, which is all the stuff that we use to tune and tweak the gameplay. You know, we have 9 internal development channels, which is sort of this. We have all these different channels where we build on, and different like the artists can get a certain build, the engineers can get a certain build. You know, we've already pushed out more than 16 petabytes, and petabytes is a very, very, very big number, of data to the community with the updates we're doing. And we are actually working on trying to be a bit more efficient about that, because we haven't necessarily been as efficient as we can be about. But lots of big numbers for. So anyway, where do we go from here? Yeah, what happened there? Oh, okay. Someone changed that heading there. So I think I've already talked about this, but this is basically where the game is at right now. This spring, we're going to be doing the early release of the first person, and we're going to have the PlanetSide social part that's out there. And then, although it's not beta, it's alpha. I think this is an older version. I don't know why that's there. And then summer, we're going to have the Arena Commander 2.0 multi-crew ships, and that's the ones where instead of single-seater ships, which is what you saw in the current Arena Commander demo, it's ones with the bigger ships where you and a crew can be on it. So your friend can be manning a turret, someone else can be at the navigation station, someone else is flying it, someone's down in engineering fixing the engines. And then the first episode of Squadron 42 is going to be the end of fall of this year, and then the Persistent Universe, the first alpha is at the end of this year, and then next year, probably towards the end of it, is when everything will be all together in one package with most of the content there. So really from sort of the end of this year to the end of next year, it's really going to be a big content drive and fine-tuning and honing drive. And you know, that's sort of where we are in the process. I mean, you know, it's been a pretty amazing ride. I mean, we aren't finished yet. There's a lot of work to be done. You know, I'm really happy to be in this situation. It's most fun I've ever had making anything. You know, I'm very thankful to everyone that's supported us and able to do that, and I think we'll do something that everyone will be quite proud and happy with. And so there you are. Thank you guys for listening to me drone on.
Epic. Thank you very much, Chris. And there's still much more to come. That's what's the crazy part of it all. All right, well, we're going to take a quick 10-minute break right now, and then we'll be back with Chris to do some Q&A. And if you guys have questions, think them up. We'll have 2 microphones. And those of you watching on Twitch, we'll be back with you in 10 minutes, so don't go anywhere. There are over 75,000 people watching on Twitch, so cool stuff. Yes, lots of people. All right, we'll see you in 10 minutes. Thanks. All right, we are back here. There we go. We're back here. Thanks for joining us on Twitch again, and thanks for joining us here in the audience. We have 2 microphones. If you have questions for Chris, feel free to start lining up. But first of all, it was a great presentation, a great journey through an amazing career. Out of all the game developers, you're the guy that I think has had the most interesting path sort of in and then out and then back into games. You sort of talked about the idea of, deciding to come back into the industry and how you thought the time was right. Was that sort of a eureka moment for you one day, or were you thinking for years and years, like, I want to get back in games? Because sometimes I think a lot of people that knew you, I think, thought, hey, he's gone off and he's not coming back. He doesn't want to come back.
Well, no, actually, so I mentioned it in the talk, was there was that eureka moment that was when I saw Avatar, which was I was sort of, when I was young, I used to go see a movie every, especially when I was first over here when I was like 18, 19. And, I'd look forward to Friday and whatever would come out, and you go see it on opening night. And I just sort of felt like it was a sense of like discovery. And I would, and I guess maybe I'm just older and, I'm get more cynical, or I've, started to make films. And so it's all not as magical anymore. But I sort of was feeling like the magic that where I felt like individual films were more special. Like I was feeling that less and less. Like a lot of times I'd just sort of be watching a film, and very rarely I would feel something that would really sort of take me to the time or place, or sort of kind of immerse me. And Avatar, even though you can say, well, maybe some of the plotting and the dialogue was maybe a bit stiff, the sense of world and how it put you in that world, just I was like, okay, that's an experience. I just had this immersive experience. And and like I said, that was the only film immersive experience I'd had that year. Yes, there were some other films I saw that had like really beautiful performances and everything else, but in terms of putting me in a world, that was the one. And I'd sort of felt like I'd already played 2 or 3 games that year that had done that. And so I was sort of feeling that, because of the shift in technology, that, now you had the tools to create the world to the level of immersion that I think could engage you. And so that was sort of my moment that said, okay, I want to come back and engage. And it wasn't right away because, I was making movies, and so it was sort of a time to finish up my movies. And then I spent some time looking at how I wanted to come back. So I, was looking at coming back and being much more traditional, make Wing Commander, do it on console, do it with EA, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then I spent time sort of absorbing what I felt what the game business felt to me, and I sort of felt like it was like there was a time when I first was at Origin, and when I joined them, it was like that was the beginning of the sort of heyday of PC and computer games, and it sort of felt like anything was possible because the business models were still getting developed, and didn't cost a lot of money. I mean, like Wing Commander 1 cost me $100,000 to make, and my own time, but that's back then it didn't seem like that was that much of a sacrifice to make. And now obviously things cost a lot more than that. And so I sort of felt like with the change with digital distribution and the way you could connect to people in a way that you couldn't, even 5 or 10 years ago, that there was that shift again in like how the business operated, and if you took advantage of it, you could do something great. And that was so the business, the sort of opportunity for the shift in the business model, plus sort of the technology were the 2 things that sort of pulled me back into games.
Yeah, so I like that point that, sort of Avatar inspired you creatively, and then, as you said, on the business side, you looked at a bunch of different models. Was there like a Kickstarter, or was there something that you looked at and said, hey, this feels like the right path for this game?
So originally my plan, actually, this was because, this was before Tim Schafer launched his, Broken Age, Double Fine Adventure at the time.
Yeah.
I had originally, so I'd actually watched like Minecraft with great interest, where, like I originally saw it as, sort of a developer that had done these sophisticated graphical games. I'm like, well, that's really basic, but it's kind of cool. And then just this whole model where it was sort of, here's my alpha, donate some money to it and I'll make it better. And it sort of, carried on going and sort of gaining momentum. And it was this really great way to, I think, organically ramp yourself up. And so my original idea was, I'm going to try and do something like that. So I was going to raise some money to get to sort of a very rough alpha state, and then basically sell this sort of early alpha access and use the funds to finish off the game. And so I started having some conversations with some investors for that. And then during the time that I was building my prototype, which took about a year to build, Tim launched his Double Fine Adventure Kickstarter, and it did 3.3 million. And it was like there was this moment, and I was sort of like, and at that point, the most difficult thing you ever have with anyone that's investing in something is they go, well, there's always an argument about valuation. You're like, oh, you should only get this much of the company, and they're like, no, we want this much of the company. And my past, I created Wing Commander, I owned Wing Commander, and I had to sell it to Electronic Arts when they bought Origin, and I didn't really want to do it, but if I didn't do it, they wouldn't have bought Origin, and then there was a lot of people that had a lot of time and effort invested at Origin that I would have like screwed over, so I sort of went on with it, even though I didn't. Neither Richard nor me wanted to. He didn't want to sell Ultima. I didn't want to sell Wing Commander, but there was a lot of other people at Origin that we didn't want to screw over, and so I didn't really want to get into a situation where I was having someone else sort of own a big chunk of like an IP that I was trying to develop. And so I thought, well, if I can crowdfund, then I can sort of prove there's a demand, and therefore it's much easier in the valuation argument. And so that was my I had no idea. I didn't think I didn't think we could raise anywhere close to money. In fact, I had a conversation with Frank Chabot, who's pretty senior at EA, and I was telling him, I said, one day, I think someone's going to raise $10 million in a crowdfunded game. I mean, it's not going to be anytime soon. It won't be me. But someone does it right. They do the right, they present it correctly and really take their time, and people get familiar with crowdfunding. I think it can happen.
Well, what's been fascinating about this game in particular in the crowdfunding sense is that, a lot of games, a lot of films, other things, Indiegogo, Kickstarters, they'll raise their money, create the product, and off they go. You're obviously talking about this more as a service. And, you have a lot of backers, as you talked about, a lot of money. What's like the average amount that a backer has given to you guys, do you think?
Well, you can do the math. I think it's just under $100 a person, which is pretty amazing because, obviously a lot of people don't do that. So I mean, the most right now we've got some you can get in it for like $20, but normally I think it's $35 or $40 was what you get in for. So there's definitely there's a group of our community that are really invested in the project.
I feel like they keep coming back.
Well,
right?
no, I think they do. I think I mean, I'm not the best person to ask. I mean, I'm sure there's a few of them around here tonight.
Any backers out here? All right,
so
look at that. They're in.
But I definitely get the feeling when I talk to him, like a lot of people sort of feel like, hey, I've dreamed about having this game built for years, and I just want this to be built right. And I don't want it to, I don't want it to be half-assed. If it was being done with the publisher, they'd probably force it out the door before it was fully ready, or then make you cut some corners here and there. And so I get the feeling that there's ongoing support from a section of the community that's about, hey, look, we're building, whatever you want to call it, we're building this palace for us all to live inside, and we want you to build the palace right. So this is and I also feel that people view gaming as their hobby, right? So for me, I've got some hobbies that are expensive, right? I mean, this was all from my film stuff, but I've got a whole collection of World War II tanks that are beautifully painted and all these Napoleonic miniatures, and I didn't do them all myself, so because I was busy making games, so I paid someone to do them, and so I've got thousands of dollars of essentially model tanks and soldiers that I can't do anything with. They look nice on my shelf, but that's about it. And and one day I tell myself, yes, I'm going to use them in my game of Empire 3, and I'll recreate the Battle of Austerlitz like I've dreamed to do since I was 18. And I think that on a certain level, or if someone plays golf, right, that just costs you a bunch of money. So it's sort of it's a choice. So I think we've got some people that basically go, look, this is my hobby. I love it. I spend a bunch of money on my PC anyway. Right. I want this thing to be right because I want to live in this universe and play in it for years. And so it's I'm having fun watching it, backing it, getting involved. So I'm supporting.
Well, you're proving it to them along the way. You're showing stuff.
Yeah, and I'm supporting it. And I think I mean, like I said, I'm putting words into people's mouths, but I get the feeling that it's about coming together to make sure this thing is great versus. I definitely feel it's about that versus people saying, oh, I'm going to have 10 ships because I want to have an advantage when the game starts.
No, and you also, you've always been outlining these kind of interesting stretch goals, I guess, for lack of a better term. I remember one, it was last year, where it's you're going to hire, linguists to, work on the languages at, I was 40-something million or whatever it was. So, I mean, you're obviously, and I'm sure even now you guys are thinking about sort of what's the next goalpost?
Well, yeah,
right?
I mean, actually, so the sort of thing that happens, I mean, I know we actually catch a lot of flack for the stretch goals because everyone says, oh, it's feature creep. But if you look at what we do, we're delivering the game right now. We keep on. So it's feature creep normally is you keep adding things that prevents you from delivering your final product. Whereas we're always delivering the product. We're just enhancing it all the time. And so our stretch goals are much more about telling people the things that we plan to work on. Whereas normally you just wouldn't share that information. Yeah. But as we raise more money, we basically say, okay, we can expand. Yes, we don't have to have this system built here before we let people run around the persistent universe, but this system would make the persistent universe cooler, so we will commit that we'll say that we'll add this in, and that'll be put into our development sort of roadmap, and so that's kind of and it's sort of a way of involving the community again in sort of the development of it all, so they can sort of see, okay, yeah, we've got in here, and now we can have this kind of feature, and in a very real way, and I've said this before, that the money that we raise sort of scopes the game. So it's not going to prevent when the game's coming out, but it's sort of scoping how ambitious the game ultimately is going to be. And so, so far the community said, we want it really ambitious.
We want it all. I mean, that's the thing you said, I think last year you had a quote where you said you thought you were going to hit $100 million before it sort of came out in 2016. Do you have any idea what the game looks like at $100 million? How far out have you, you're at... you're
well,
in the 70s
now. I'm pretty sure we'll hit 100 by the end of this ye're maybe.
Right. So what does that look like? Have you planned out? Here's
No. We've got. I mean, trust me. We're way past. The game itself. Beyond what we would say. Okay, this is sort of the first public version. We're way past that in terms of our planning. Right. We've got several years down the road planned out of various, okay, this system's good enough for now, but now we're going to upgrade it to this system. Okay, we're going to expand the exploration mechanic where we're going to have sort of procedural areas that you can explore and land on. that may not roll out for the very first iteration, but
Right.
will roll out in the 6 months or a year past that first iteration. And I mean, that's kind of fun. I mean, it's actually kind of fun to sort of not have the same sort of issues that you would in a publisher setup. Because in a publisher setup, it would be like, okay, here's your money, get the thing out. We don't know if the people are going to show up. If they show up, maybe we can talk about what you'll add to it, what you do to it. But you don't, it's hard for you to sort of plan in that situation.
Yeah.
Whereas with this, we can sort of, because we already behave like a game that's already sort of live, so to speak,
Yep.
we can sort of plan in a longer term manner. And, unless everybody suddenly gets bored with what we're doing, it sort of feels like it's going to be, a fun ride, and we're going to keep on adding and making this game bigger and better as time goes on, and everyone's going to enjoy it, because I mean, it's like I'm building a dream game, and I think it's a dream game for a lot of other people too.
Right, and it shows that the fans keep coming back and supporting it because it's becoming the game that they want it to become. Let's go to some questions in the audience, and we'll come back and talk more. But let's start over here. Oh, wow. All right. So consider it. Go ahead, sorry.
Great talk, by the way. My question is, you haven't talked about VR. I know VR is coming online, there's more interest. What do you plan to do with Star Citizen with virtual reality?
So we're supporting Oculus Rift. VR, and we'll probably support other things as they make sense in terms of the platform. So I don't know if Project Morpheus is also going to be available on a PC, but if it was, we'd probably support it. But yeah, we're pretty interested in VR. I mean, the flying around part of not Wing Commander, Star Citizen, is very appropriate for VR because you're seated. So, and you basically, if you have a HOTAS, you can fly. That's your best situation for VR. The thing that's a bit more challenging for VR is sort of the first-person shooter aspect of it, because it's a little disorienting to be moving around but not moving around. But those are all things. I mean, I think we've got some pretty decent solutions for them. So it's in the works. I mean, we're waiting for our DK2 support. I think will be in the next month or two. We've got some new people that we've hired that make a big difference to our engine development, and they're sort of now tasked with the VR. But it is something that's pretty important for us.
Cool. Question? Go ahead.
So now that Star Citizen has made as much as it has with crowdfunding, do you think that others could do the same? And how much do you think your star power, let's say, or your history with Wing Commander and with film sort of opened that possibility? And how much do you think that sort of anybody with the right idea could come forward and do something similar? And then I have a second question, I guess. How much do female gamers play into your strategy, and do you have particular programs or sort of plans or strategies related to attracting female gamers?
Okay. All right. So I definitely think that the things that we've done don't necessarily need you to have a big name to do them. So I've seen crowdfunded successes from people that haven't had big names that they've just executed really well. Now, whether you'd be able to do the volume that we've done, I mean, I sort of feel like at the moment we're probably an example of an outlier. Down the road, it may not be the case at all. But I definitely think if you engage your community and you deliver something that people want, I've seen, I mean, because back in the early days of Kickstarter, there was this game called Castle Story, which was sort of, it was essentially kind of like Minecraft meets, these creatures came out. It's hard to say. You built your castle and these creatures came out. It was about 3 kids in Montreal that just graduated from game design school, and they raised like $600,000. And they had no track record, but they had a really good demo, and they sort of had a concept that people responded to. So I definitely think that it's possible. I think the thing that people don't do well on the crowdfunding is they sort of treat it as just basically, okay, I go out, I panhandle for some money at the beginning, and then I get the money I want, and then I go off and make the game. And I think you've got to continually engage the people that have, because they were, that was the eye-opening experience for me when we first started the crowdfunding campaign. Just how excited everyone was, and just how many ideas and enthusiasm everyone had, and it was like, well, I don't want to just shut that off. Let's keep that going. It's great. And so I think if people focus on that, you definitely have a chance. And I think it's not just limited to games. It can be on other, definitely film and TV. I mean, there's a Veronica Mars Kickstarter, which they mobilized a core audience, core fan base, which in TV terms is nothing. I think it was like 90,000 or 100,000 people contributed. That would never, you're cancelled on TV if you're only getting 1 million or 2 million people. But they connected with this core audience that really wanted to see a bit more of Veronica Mars, and and I think there's going to be more and more possibilities of that. It's sort of like focusing on underserved groups, right? So like it's like if Josh Whedon came back and said, hey, I'm going to do a Firefly Kickstarter or something, I think he would probably get a bunch of money to go do it, and it could be maybe he's not getting a $200 million budget, but he'd definitely get a lot of people that would back that, and he could do something good, and he would have an opportunity to revisit a story. And I think that kind of targeted connection with core audiences will be one way to fund it. So then on the second question, as far as the on the female side of Star Citizen, that's definitely something that we're very keen on, and we're actually trying our best to, you see a lot of like some spaceships, especially Arena Commander, it's like shooting other spaceships, but we've got a lot of gameplay that is not about combat, right? So the idea is, there's a lot of people that want to just explore or want to, trade or just go and sightsee and or basically be an information runner or do all these kind of things that aren't necessarily sort of so testosterone oriented. The idea with Star Citizen is to have everything available for the audience, and it should really be kind of agnostic. It should be like real life. There's lots of things that you want to do, and also you don't really want to pigeonhole. I mean, I think there's quite a few female gamers that could kick my ass in a dogfight, definitely. But I think the idea with the game is to sort of create an option for you to do what you want to do in the universe, and it doesn't necessarily have to be about combat, it doesn't necessarily have to be about trading, it doesn't have to be about exploration. It's sort of up to you. You can be a miner, you can do all these different things, and I think that's the key to bringing in a wider group of people to play it. So it's sort of giving them the option to do different things and not force them into one kind of gameplay style.
You mentioned about different sort of styles of play that people want. On one of your slides, you had commercial release 2016. What does that mean? I mean, is it sort of like everything's all available at once, or I mean, the different modules you can buy? Or, I mean, how's that going to work?
Well, I think the way we're looking at it is that that's at the point where the core systems of the game are all together, that we sort of consider that sort of Star Citizen like 1.0. So it has the core functionality that you have the persistent universe and the base star systems and environments you can land on, and it all functions together in a holistic environment. So the persistent universe is really the driver of that.
Yeah.
I mean, before that, most of the systems will be running and functioning, first-person combat, the space flight, even Squadron 42 in terms of the story. But the persistent universe, which is the universe you'll live in for a long time, is the one that's got the most amount of content in it, and so it's going to take the longest amount of time to fashion. I mean, we've got something like 450 separate landing environments that you're going to have to land that are all, they're all like first-person levels in a Call of Duty or something. So now we're working on some tools to make it easier and have a certain level of sort of procedural assistance in doing it, but this is just a massive amount of content to create. So that's really sort of the dividing factor of it, but we're going to try to be sharing the game with everyone that's joined and backed before we sort of considered it being like, it's the 1.0. But, it's kind of like the way Minecraft was, right? At some point, Notch arbitrarily said, okay, it's not an alpha or beta anymore, it's finished. Yeah. And they still add features to it afterwards. So that's where the 2016 date comes from.
Right, and I'm sure it'll constantly be updated with more stuff and new stuff after that.
Yeah, if you look at World of Warcraft now, you look at EVE Online now, and look at it 10 years ago, they're vastly different games in terms of how they look and how they play. And I'm sure if we're lucky enough on Star Citizen to last that long, it'll be the same.
Is there any appeal to you of sort of the old model, or as you said, I mean, is it so broken that it says you could never see yourself wanting to do anything different than this?
It would be hard.
Yeah.
Well, it's a rat race, like the normal sort of publishing setup in games is, it's the economics I talked about. It's like generally to make something of the quality people want, you got to be investing $30, $40, $50 million into the production itself. Then once you've invested $50 million into it, you know,
Roll the
you
dice.
know, already the numbers are saying, well, I got to sell at least 2 to 3 million units of that. So 2 to 3 million units, that's another $20 to $30 million of cost of goods. So now you're at, say $80 million in costs. And well, I need to market it. I want people to know about it. So that's another at least $30 to $40 million. So you're over $100 million in before you've sold a copy. So at that point, publishers are only making bets on things they feel very good about. And if you're a developer and you're creating that, like, the publisher's not going, oh yeah, here you are, I'll just give you $100 million and you do whatever you want for the IP, and don't worry, you keep all the profits and I won't keep any of them. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
I sort of, and I also feel like you get constrained because, at that kind of investment, people get sort of risk averse. With what we're doing on Star Citizen, there is not a single publisher in the world that would have backed us to build the game with the level of ambition. They would have said, okay, just start with this little thing here, and then you can build up from there and there. And in some ways, you could argue that could be a good approach, but I think you have to architect something for what it's going to be from the beginning, so to speak.
Just saying, is there any worry that you're too ambitious with all of these different pieces all sort of coming online at the same time?
Well, I would say that's a valid criticism, but I'm a fairly ambitious and tenacious person. So no, I mean I feel like I don't feel like we won't deliver. I don't feel worried about any of the technical challenges in getting the game out. Right. The one area that is which is standard in development is that is it all going to be on time? Probably not. It never is. Right. Is everything always going to go smoothly? No. There'll probably be some server meltdown somewhere or something. Yeah. I mean, there's all that sort of stuff. But I think given the support and the dedication of everyone and what I know the team's capable of doing, then we're going to get there. We'll get across that finish line. It just may not be exactly when we thought we were going to get across that finish line.
No, and so far everyone's had a great time inside of it. Next question.
On behalf of myself and numerous people that I both know and don't know for creating Star Citizen.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for supporting it.
And making the game that I think certainly hundreds of thousands, if not millions of us have wanted for 20 years or so since I played Privateer for the first time. So again,
this
thank
man's
you.
an investor.
Yeah, well, he's got the T-shirt.
And I am an investor.
How much are you in for?
I'm a high admiral.
Four-figure investment?
It's about $12.50.
Okay. Wow. All right.
So my first question involves the sort of mod community and the social aspects of that. You mentioned League of Legends. There's been League of Legends and StarCraft mods and Counter-Strike for Half-Life and stuff like that have extended and gone on to be huge successes in their own right. And you have said before that you were going to be releasing servers for private servers that people could mess around with, aspects of the persistent universe. And I'd love to get more detail on that and a time frame of how long after the persistent universe stuff like that come out and what sort of tools you're planning on having to support that community. And then my other question is the communication in MMOs has always been tragically weak in terms of you can sit or you can dance or you can say hi to someone in text, but anything beyond that you have to go to third-party applications. And I heard a rumor that you were going to go as far as to have software that would read lips and then project those lips onto your avatar or something like that. And so yeah, I'm wondering what sort of tools are going to be out for the persistent universe.
Well, actually, the last part's not that difficult because if you get a Logitech web camera, it already does it. I mean, basically, what we were talking about was live driver, which is essentially if you've got a webcam, it can do some not high fidelity, not like you would do with a really expensive motion capture setup, but performance capture setup, but you can drive the avatar's lips. So like if you were talking, then you would see the lips, and then we're talking about doing sort of situational VoIP. So it basically will be sort of your voice but filtered based on like what your location is and what your direction is. So
Wow.
those are things that we are definitely, we have 3 audio programmers, by the way, which is probably, you know, a lot, and fairly big audio department. So those are all things that are on the list. As far as the sort of server and the mod tools, so like one of the, you know, there's 2 things. One, you know, I'd like to be able to try and get some user-generated content actually into the main persistent universe. We sort of did a little bit of that with the Next Great Starship, but it'd be nice to sort of have that on a sort of, you know, a less sort of focused style where we can have some curation and, you know, people could develop stuff. And then on the personal mod server stuff, I mean, you know, I'm a big fan of that because, you know, Freelancer was, you know, came out in 2003, and there's still Freelancer servers around, mainly just because mod's there, because Microsoft abandoned it a long time ago. So the tricky thing with really the sort of mod server side of things is just that, you know, the infrastructure we're building for the persistent universe is like a crazy infrastructure that's like, you know, many thousands of like essentially Google Compute servers that spin up and on demand depending on where the players are to handle, you know, what we would think would be maybe, you know, 1 million or 2 million players at sort of like the height. Contain version where maybe, you know, you can have 64 or 128 or something like that, you know, depending on whatever the sort of bandwidth and the update would be of you know, your snapshot of the actual universe. And so that's going to be the part that will sort of come after the persistent universe is up and running, because we sort of have to have that done, and then we sort of see what parts we can cook down to a sort of single server instance, and what parts we can't and would have to be more static versus the persistent universe is you know, sort of more dynamic on a global basis, just because we're building it with, you know, I mean, it's you know, it's got a lot of, it's got like game servers and system servers and economy servers, and so it's a pretty huge undertaking on the engineering side there. The other thing that like we'll be focused on is trying to build some nice usable kind of mod tools, so you can sort of go in there and, you know, maybe create your own spaceship or, you know, set up your own weapons and stuff. And that would be useful for our content creators, because, you know, right now it's not particularly friendly. It's you know, you would build your spaceship in Max, and you would have to go and edit XML files and know exactly how the system does. But again, some of those tools are sort of there later, you know, so we're talking sort of those things are more sort of towards the 2016, 2017 timeline for the user-generated tools, because that's sort of later in the dev cycle. We'll get the base systems working, you know, get the full sort of persistent universe server, then sort of engineer it down to, okay, now you're running with, you know, 100 players or something, and go from there. So that's kind of the timeline. So I don't know if that helps you out, but that's sort of what our thinking and plan is. What's that? Yeah. So basically, it would be also, you know, like mission creation tools, and we're definitely going to. You'll have some tools available sooner. So like, sort of kind of like your own sort of Machinima tools and all that kind of stuff is going to be much sooner in the process. So we're going to allow people to sort of do that and direct some of their own sort of set up some of their own stuff in the game sooner than, say, maybe the full, like, okay, I can have my own private server kind of stuff going. But it would definitely include sort of story and mission tools. So there's a whole sort of mission system that we'd have that we would expose to you know, people to sort of build their, you know, because the economy server dynamically creates missions, but also it creates them in this mission template that you can also, you know, hand script. And so that's the persistent universe mostly runs with missions that are sort of procedurally built, and then some that are specifically built by designers.
This is the rest of your life. Do you ever, I mean, this is so ongoing, there's so many things. I mean, is there anything you want to do beyond this, or is this going to be, I mean, all your hopes and dreams rolled into this thing and will evolve over time?
You never say never, right? That's
but it's conceivably just keep going, right?
No, I definitely think it's going to go on. I mean, I think this is a long-term project. I mean, I sort of view myself committed to this for many years. I don't sort of view like, oh, I'm done next year and I'm off on a desert island and enjoying the sun. No, you know, it's kind of hard to say. I mean, it's you know, ultimately I'd love to be in a position where you know, I can, you know, do this and maybe do some other sort of creative endeavors, you know, another type of game, or maybe go and do a movie again or something.
Star season movie.
But that's a sort of much more long term. I mean, for me, this is heads down, you know, until all the pieces are together and it's functioning well. So.
Awesome. All right, well, I know we're going to wrap up here, but if you guys have questions, Chris is going to hang out, I think, at the reception, so you guys can chat from there, hopefully. And I want to thank everyone for watching live on Twitch tonight, and all of you joining.